This past weekend, I, along with 50,000 plus other amazing individuals, ran in the New York City Marathon. Now, it wasn't my first marathon, it was actually my fourth. I ran it back in 2015, 2016, and 2018. After the 2018 marathon, I thought I was going to be done with running. I achieved my goals. But after the past few years of going to the New York City Marathon as a spectator, I sort of got the itch. So I decided to enter the lottery for the past 2 years. The first time I entered, I didn't get in. But this year, luckily, I got chosen through the lottery and I was able to run. Now, in the past marathons, my only goal was really to finish, but this year I wanted to do things a little bit differently and actually try to aim for a goal. So I decided to change up a few things. And in looking back at my training leading up to this past marathon, I took a look at what were the things that I changed and what would I say were the 5 biggest things that led to the improvement that I had this year. I feel like if this were my past self running their first marathon, these are pieces of information that I feel like would be super helpful and at least getting me on the right path and in better shape than I was in those past marathons. Because like I said, my only goal in those past ones was to finish. And a lot of them, I struggled through it. I ended up walking and hurting. But this year, I felt like I was in the best shape of my life. I was able to run throughout the entire thing. I never stopped to walk, which is a goal in itself. So in this video, I'm going to share with you what these 5 things were that I changed that will maybe help you. The first thing, which I feel like is almost an obvious thing, is to set a stretch goal. So not only will you have your main goal, for me in the first few marathons it was just finishing, and this year my main goal was just to beat any other time that I had in the past. I would say to go above that and set a stretch goal or an aggressive goal that might not be attainable, or I would say you feel like you have maybe a 20% shot of making that goal. So for me, my fastest marathon I ran in about 4.5 hours. So I just wanted to beat 4.5 hours, go faster than that. But to go even further than that, I set a stretch goal of trying to break 4 hours entirely, try to get into the 3-hour range. So for me, even though I felt like that was a really tough goal to break because that meant significantly increasing my pace over the course of these 26 miles, it was something that ended up driving me and my training. It was the reason why I decided to allocate more time to training each week, more than I ever have before. And it was the reason why I really was focusing on metrics and timing in all of my practice runs. And I got really serious about it. And just by setting that additional stretch goal, it really pushed me to work harder in my training. And not only did I crush my main goal, I got very, very close to breaking 4. I ended up missing it by 7 minutes. But now, even after the marathon is done, just because I just barely missed that goal, I am actually motivated. And I'm still itching to continue to run after this versus my last marathon in 2018, where after that, I told myself I was done with running. I didn't want to run another mile after that. But I think this is just very helpful to put you in a good psychological space. And when it comes to setting goals, there's a saying out there that says to aim for the moon and land on the clouds. And that's essentially what I did in setting this goal. That leads me to the next change that I made, and it still has to do a little bit with training and being serious about training, is that I focused a lot more this year on fueling, food, and water. Not only throughout a race, but also just in my normal everyday diet and life. I remember the first marathon that I ran back in 2015, I was almost like telling people that I wanted to see if I could run a marathon without changing anything else in my life, and that included diet and food. So I was still eating fast food. I was like, oh, I could eat all this fast food because I'm going to burn the calories anyway in my training. But I decided to change all that and follow the diet recommendations and eat healthier, less red meat, less, bad junk food. I mean, I still ate some, but it was significantly less than in the past years that I ran the marathon. But not only that, in the marathon and in training, I practiced with gels. So even in my training runs, I practiced eating gels, getting my body used to it, knowing what it's about and how to use that energy during a run in a way that I haven't done in past marathons. I actually had a story back in the 2016 marathon where I don't like running with things on me. And I remembered in the marathon that I ran before, they actually had these stations where they handed out gels throughout the way. And I thought I could rely on the stations for gels and that kind of energy. And when I ran that marathon, I did not see a single gel station at all, which led me to basically grabbing anything and everything that people were handing on the side of the course, from bananas to candies to snacks, because I was starving. And I think that was the first time it hit me in that second marathon how important it is to go in with a game plan as far as gels or nutrition during the run instead, above just whatever your diet is in training and in your normal everyday life. Aside from that, even came down to hydration. So in those past marathons, I used to always run and only grab a water if I was thirsty, because I thought that it was going to hold me up to slow down at every single water station to grab some water to drink. But that was another thing that I changed as far as nutrition and fueling, was that every single water station I stopped and drank a glass of water, even if I didn't think I needed it, even if I didn't feel thirsty, just because I knew my body was going to constantly be using that water and I would get dehydrated if I didn't do that, which is what happened in past marathons. That brings me to the third thing that I changed, and it is this. So in the past years, I used to run with an Apple Watch, but this year I decided to invest in a running specific watch. And this right here is the Coros Pace 3. And I felt like just changing my watch did wonders for me in my training and in my strategy when it came to trying to achieve this stretch goal of mine. And the reason why I felt like this was super important was because when I had my Apple Watch, it had a lot of little user experience issues with it. Since I used it as my main watch every single day and the battery wasn't that great, I would always forget to make sure it was fully charged before a long run, and it would die a lot in the middle of a long run just because I forgot to charge it. Whereas a watch like this has an amazing battery life. I could go several days with this thing without charging it. It'll last me almost 2 weeks without needing to charge it. So whenever it comes to a long run or anything like that, I could be down to 40% battery and I still know that it's going to make it to the end of a 15-hour run. The other things are even just having this button on it that easily just starts and pauses runs, especially if you're running in New York City where you've got all the stoplights and all the stuff that you have to take a quick break for, to be able to stop and start it very easily. Whereas with the Apple Watch, at least the ones that I used, having to hit that touch screen and press a couple buttons, it wasn't as reliable as something like this that has built-in features in it made for running. The fourth thing that I had changed this year were my shoes. In all of my past marathons, I basically always thought that I should buy the latest and greatest thing from Nike, so I'd always end up buying their most expensive premier marathon shoe. And in all of those past years, I always dealt with some injuries and knee pain. My IT band would always get sore, and yeah, I never really thought to blame the shoes, because I felt like since I was buying the most expensive thing from Nike that must have had a bunch of research done on it and is used by the best marathon racers in the world, I thought that that was just the shoe to wear. But this year I decided to look around and do a little bit more research on shoes, specifically training shoes. I tried a couple pairs from Brooks, but then when I ended up trying some pairs from Asics, I ended up landing on using this shoe, which is the Nova Blast 4. So this is actually the shoe that I used in training. I actually love this like all white colorway. But when I started using these training shoes, I just felt like a complete world of difference. There's a lot more cushion, a lot more support in the sole, and the upper is a lot more sturdy, whereas a lot of the shoes that I was wearing in the past from Nike, the upper part of the shoe was like more of a flimsy, like light knit material. And the moment I started training in these shoes, I felt the difference. I was going slower, I'm not gonna lie about that, but my legs just felt like it had way more support. I would not end up feeling any soreness or pains that I used to feel after maybe a month of training. And yeah, after maybe 2 or 3 months of using these shoes, I thought that they were amazing. Ultimately, when it came to thinking about what I would wear for the marathon, I definitely considered going to wear the Nike shoes or some sort of racing shoes with a carbon plate. So I even experimented with Asics. These are the Metaspeed Skies, and they have a carbon plate in the bottom of it. I thought about using a shoe with a carbon plate on the bottom because I know what kinds of benefits that it gives you, how it makes you faster. But ultimately, a couple weeks before the marathon, I just decided to stick with the training shoes that I've been wearing throughout all of my training. So I got an all black pair of these Nova Blast 4s, and ultimately this is the shoe that I ran the marathon in. And I feel like it just really changed the game as far as my training. I didn't get any injuries, so I didn't really have to take significant time off to heal. I was able to consistently train, and yeah, I felt like my feet and my legs were very nicely supported, and I feel like I owe it to the shoes that helped me basically stay running the entire marathon, whereas I probably would have felt some pains using another type of shoe. Now this brings me to the last thing that I changed this year in the way that I ran the marathon. What I basically did was a couple nights before the marathon, now this is going to sound super geeky, but I coded up this pace calculating app, whatever you'll call it, and I'm going to share it with you here. But basically what I used this for was to let me know what average pace I needed to hit on each mile of the marathon. But not only that, I wanted to be able to tweak it at specific miles because not every single mile you're going to be running at that evenly split pace. But you know, at the beginning of the marathon, for example, you're going to be running significantly slower. Then in the middle, and then towards the end, you're possibly going to start slowing down again. So I really wanted to get granular about at specific miles where I needed to be as far as pace. It's not going to be this one pace for every single mile. But since I have a super analytical mind, I wanted to basically give myself this data to know if I go this amount slower on this lap, how do I need to make up for it in another lap? How fast do I need to go? And giving myself some grace both at the beginning of the marathon and also at the end of the marathon to have slower paces. Because in the past marathons, when it came to thinking about what pace I wanted to hit, I basically just take the total time that I was looking to get and then dividing it evenly by 26 just to know ballpark. But in my data brain, I need to go a little bit further and know a little bit more about, you know, how I want to attack that strategy as far as hitting a certain pace for the miles as I go throughout the marathon. Another way that this tool was super helpful for me as well was that in knowing ballpark around what I'd be getting in pace along the way, it actually helped me create a playlist. So this year, this is kind of a twofer, but this year I made a 4+ hour playlist, and I wanted to make sure that certain tracks played at certain times in the race. So for example, I wanted a lot more slower songs in the beginning when I wanted to run slower and just ease into it. But then in parts of the race where I knew I was going to need motivation, this also comes from experience of running the marathon. For example, I wanted a really hyped up song to play when I'm on the Queensboro Bridge, when it's going to be super quiet and there won't be a crowd cheering. I wanted a specific song to play around the time that I was going to see Jess, my wife, and my mom along the course. And then even at the end, in the last few miles, like knowing specific tracks that I know that I'm just gonna like bob my head and get into in those last few miles where all you can think about is how much it's hurting. But using this pace calculator, it actually helped me time those tracks quite perfectly. It actually worked out pretty well. The songs came on at about the same times that I'd estimated using my pace estimator. And yeah, it just ended up working very nicely. I was able to kind of like psychologically hack myself to get through the hardest parts of the race by using music and also using this pace calculator to know when those tracks should come up. It also was a tool to let me know if I was well along the pace that I wanted to be, because if I reached a certain point and I did it before a specific track came on, then I knew I was in a good spot. But even in towards the later parts of the marathon, when I was starting to slow down, I knew that I was kind of falling a little bit behind because a song came on earlier than I expected it to. So this was about maybe 3 hours worth of work before, like literally a couple nights before the marathon. I have so many more ideas on how this could be improved and maybe possibly making that music integration in this tool as well. So I want to further develop this, so hopefully anybody out there who's watching this video could possibly use it for any races that you're going to be going to. So stay tuned for that. I also want to do a whole breakdown of like what I was thinking and how I built it and what features I'm going to be adding to it. So watch out for a future video on that, because I do want to demo this in a little bit more detail once I add a few more things to it. And I ultimately do want to release it out to any runners out there who think that this will help them and have kind of the similar like analytical brain to themselves in the way that I also approach races. So those were the top 5 things that I changed in this year's marathon. And like I said, it helped me basically PR by over 25 minutes this year. And I felt great afterwards. Literally, it's been 3 days now after running the marathon, and I feel like my body is fully recovered now. I feel like actually going out for a run right now. If you guys like this, I definitely want to continue to share any of these learnings that I have. If you're a runner yourself, I'd be happy to give you more advice.